Aisha Malone. I am the owner and co-founder of Rose Café. Just to tell you guys a little bit about Rose Café. Rose Café is a reading cafe that we're trying to bring to the 60628 area code. We are trying to encompass a lot of language arts in the community where we're highlighting like authors, we're highlighting artists, and like even local artists. We're trying also to like model like behavior that we want to see in the communities by opening up a space around different schools where like kids can like walk by and see us having high level conversations and think that's something that they wanted to engage in. Rose Cafe is very important to me because I do live in a community and I want it to be a walking community where access to literacy is there. I want to introduce you guys to my co-founder and creative director, Rebecca Silverman, who want to talk about like all the things we've been done, and continue to do.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and like Aisha said, I'm the creative director and co-founder at Rose Cafe. And in addition to just creating the space in the neighborhood, we want to create literacy access through having that space because Roseland is currently a book desert, meaning there is a lack of access to books and literacy. So some things that we have done, our brick and mortar isn't open yet, but some things that we've done even without the store being open since last summer, we have given out 8,000 books to the Roseland community through our book drives. We've hosted author talks and book clubs, and we are very excited. Today is one of our author talks with Keiyonna. You can introduce yourself and then we'll get started.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Keiyonna Dubashi, and I am the author of What's That Noise, which is a children's book about protests. And I'm super excited to be here with you all and really inspired by the work that you're doing in your community. So thank you for having me.
So today's segment will be just a little different because we finally have an author that's going to read their book. I think that What's That Noise is very important because it will kind of give us a lens of the children who were also involved in like what was going on last year. But sometimes, you know, we don't not value, but sometimes what they think is going on is not highlighted. So we really appreciate that. That's why we even wanted to talk to you guys. And so in today's segment, she will be reading her book. And after she reads the book, me and Rebecca have some questions that we want to ask her. And hopefully we can ask everybody to, I guess what do I want to say, Rebecca? What do we want the people to do?
If you have any questions as we're reading, feel free to send them in the chat. Otherwise, we're just going to let her read her story and then we'll talk some more about it at the end.
This beautiful book is dedicated to my sons, Naeem and Wasim, who were the inspiration for it. Thank you, Aisha. And that is what the book looks like in print in real life. What's that noise? Chants and cheers, sneers and jeers. Those are the sounds from the freedom fighters near. What's that noise? It's the sound of the fight for freedom. It's the sound of the fight for rights. It's the sound of a heartbeat to a drum. It's the sound of hope for generations yet to come. What's the fight? What's not right? Why are they marching day and night? Some are fighting for the safety and to feel protected. Some are fighting hard to make sure they aren't neglected. Some are fighting and walking out their pain and frustration. Some are fighting as they march to show their disappointment in our nation. What's that noise? It's the breaking of the silent. It's protest against the violent. It's the demand for compassion, care, and access. It's the demand to be seen. What is that sound? Why is it so loud? It sounds like a cry from a large crowd. What is that wail? Why does the voice sound so frail? Can I look outside my window and see the faces behind the sad voices? It is the sound of a people oppressed. It is the sound of mourning, sorrow, and tears. It is the sound of victims and unguided bullets. It is the sound of people with good conscience. Open your window, child, so you may learn how to fight. When something goes wrong, stand up and shine your light. Why is the sky so dull? Why are the clouds so heavy? Why is there so much dust in the air? Why do I sense that anger is near? Why do I feel this deep fear? I hear the thudding feet. My heart skips a beat. How can this be? The sky has witnessed injustice, maltreatment of the poor and helpless. The air has heard the distress, cruelty to the weak and indifferent. The earth has been planted with victims of bullying. She is weary of holding the victims.
Mm.
Our feet must hurry. Our bodies must rise to find the courage that we need to stand face to face with the mean, to demand our freedom. Oops, is that the smell of smoke? Do you smell it too? Do you see the escalating flames, the torn signs, broken rails? Can you see the spiraling and thick smoke? They are burning the pillars down. They are pulling the bridges down. They are tearing the city down. There is chaos in the streets. But in the burning fire, I see a calming peace. In the careless burning and anger, I see unity. It is the spirit of humanity. Humanity means empathy. Empathy means love and kindness, kindness and fairness, fairness to the tall, fairness to the short, fairness to the black and brown, fairness in tort. The flames will tear injustice down, and when we wake, we'll build a new town, one that will be based on humanity, one that will be founded on empathy. Siren sound floods the scanty streets. Men and women scurry to the shelters. What is that thundering sound? Why have the sirens stopped? Who are those calling for order? I hear the siren sounds too. I see the men and women scurrying to the shelters too. I hear the thundering sound and the angry scowls from the faceless men. It is an act to discourage. It is an act to disarrange. The ones that have chosen the path of justice, the people that have chosen to say what is right. They may go into hiding for a while, but they hide not in tears, but in smiles, knowing that they return stronger. Their voices will become louder, their feet will become bolder. But I hear the howling siren and the upsetting thundering, but we shall not give up. The sign gleam with colorful writings. Do you see it? The signs shout the same thing. Do you read it? Should we go a little nearer so we can see a little clearer? They are writings from broken people. They are paintings from marginalized people, faces scorched by the heat of the sun, voices trembling and screaming until freedom is won, hands firm yet shaking from raising the boards too high. I see the signs. I can read every letter written, words of a people downtrodden and smitten, words calling for a change and correction, the signs gleaming with colorful writings of ugly stories filled with pain, crying, and rejection. One day we will conquer. One day we will rise. One day we will gather the unity that was put asunder. One day love will rule the world. We will show kindness to all. But for now, we must learn to say it all, to speak out loud with our jeers and our signs until feet fight and fight until hate resigns. And that's a little about me, and I'm not gonna read that.
Nope.
Thank you so much for reading that.
Of course. Thank y'all for having me.
So we wanted to start off by asking you if you could tell us about your inspiration for writing the book.
I think you can see the character that is right on the front cover of the book. That is my son, Naeem. He is currently a 4th grade student. Yep, that's Naeem in the 4th grade. And he is definitely the reason why I wrote this story.
So, okay, so Naeem was the reason you wrote this story. So in the book, you said like one of the parts of like, Mom, what's that at the window? So sometimes we have parents who do things a little different. Close the window, get away from the window. But you're like, no, what's that sound, son? That's them fighting. So I was wondering, like, when kids have questions that can expose them to what's going on, could you kind of talk about like what is important information that we need to give to our kids? What is like too much information? Like, how do we decipher like what we should tell our kid? Because some parent might have said like, close the window, get away from it.
Yeah, I think that for me, the window to the world that he was experiencing was definitely more so probably in the news. And I don't think that he had an opportunity to be shielded away from it. So Naeem was 9 years old. I remember holding him when I learned of the verdict for Trayvon Martin. And so it just seems like all of his life, he has had to almost be confronted with the violence against Black and brown bodies. And so he hasn't had an opportunity to live, like in some of whatever rose-colored world, kind of like maybe how I grew up a little bit, just being able to turn away. So because he's so exposed to it, I mean, I just followed his lead. He was seeing a lot of protests on television. I think we went to a museum downtown Raleigh, and he saw people in the streets, and he asked me like, what is going on? And the signs, I mean, there was a large gathering, a crowd. We kind of ran into it, didn't know. And I've taken him to a protest before. And so he has been a part of a movement in terms of knowing that like citizens can take up their signs, and they can use their voices and their feet to show and to demonstrate their basic civil rights. And that's just, just sharing their voice and perspective. And so I leaned on him to just determine what should the narrative be. I think the reason why I wrote this story is because there was seeming to be a little bit of a different spin on a narrative. And so while you have folks who look like me fighting for our basic humanity, right, and to just like not be killed, I think that there was a different narrative that was being spun that could be really potentially harmful and dangerous for people of color to internalize. And that was that people who were protesting and were demanding equal rights were hoodlums, and they were gangsters, and they didn't care about their neighborhoods. And I just wrote this story to make sure that I combated that narrative and to help just speak truth to power so that he would have a narrative that was empowering and not think that there was something wrong with speaking out against injustice, especially in such a landscape where it's so politically divided.
And hearing you talk about the protests that you went to with him and, these different ideas, one thing that we noticed that was interesting was you never like directly called out that they were Black Lives Matter protests. And it kind of made it seem to us like it could have been any protest. Was that intentional, and why did you do that? If so.
I think it's intentional because sometimes in order to shake a table, you got to get in the room first. And I think that if I had called that out, nowadays you say the letter CRT, and people want to just dismiss you. But actually, we're just talking about history. It either happened or it didn't happen. And a lot of these things actually happened, right? And so some of it is an intentional way to just, I'm not hiding from the fact that the truth is in the story. And I think that there's a world in which I'm just trying to meet people where they are. And so some of that is just like towing the line and telling my story and just trying to understand like where people are and so that you can just have a dialogue. So much of everything in our world, our health, our housing, everything is just so politicized, and it's either left or it's right. And I think there's something about that sweet spot right in the middle. And so without calling out Black Lives Matter, because if you say that, then you're a Marxist, you're racist, it's reverse racism. You can still talk about the issues that face communities, right? I don't even have to name the community. I think people can discern that for themselves without having to be so provocative that the book doesn't even make it into a room.
And so that had me thinking when I was talking to Rebecca, I'm like, yeah, so she's talking about like things that, we go through, right? That we went through. 2020 was big. And then I'm like, when I opened up the book, after talking to you and everything, Keiyonna, and I saw, and this is me, I saw like the white boy with the rainbow color shirt. And then I kept going. I'm like, oh, Rebecca, there's two more. And I just kept going, and I just kept going. And then I was wondering, like, what would, like, she had a meaning behind like the illustration. And I was wondering if you could talk to like people like, because it's very diverse. And like, you had to think about that when you were talking about this.
Yeah, I did think about that. I think some of the most pivotal times in history that we probably are on the verge of being truly liberated is when we bound all of our liberation up together. And I think that when that happened, right, like people recognize the power of poor white folks who maybe didn't have the same similar rights to people of color. And because of that, like that movement was stifled and shut down. But I think that the Black Panthers were onto something with that particular coalition building. And so if I can get somebody to see how like their oppression can line up right with mine, I think that there's power and strength in numbers, but that takes time. That takes meeting people where they are. And if I am dismissive of any person's person's identity, I risk that coalition building, which could mean my liberation. And so I think there is something about like bounding it all up together and just recognizing that intersectionality exists in all communities, and we're probably better together.
And I'm sorry, Rebecca, and I know you're ready, but I was thinking like that has a lot to do with like how me and Rebecca like, came together and to like, figure out like what we had in common, regardless of like what we had separate, and how we can join together to make Rose Cafe like bigger if it was done just me or done just her. Like if we could join the forces and let people know that like we got a lot more similarities than we do than what, and that just really spoke to me when you said that.
Thanks, Aisha.
Yeah, and that's also making me think when you were saying about coming together about our collective and shared oppression, that also I feel like, it does bring up, if it was a white parent talking to their child reading this book, they can also start talking about the ideas of like white privilege and why it is important for white people to show up in these instances, even if it's not directly affecting them, you can show up still.
I think there's an entry point for everyone, right? Because I think that it would be easy for even a white person to just say, let me just talk about what it means for our identity. And my child is a member of the LGBTQIA community. And so I'm just going to talk about that. But then the illustrations don't allow for you to ignore the oppression of everyone else. There are like girls in the book who are hijabi. And so we should talk about what that means for them and Islamophobia in our country, as well as, the rights for Black people. And we talk specifically and mention the faceless men. And I think that most folks would assume that could be like an enforcement that sometimes over polices different communities. And I think that's right. But I just think there's some intentionality in leaving some of that open to discovery.
Right, and that's what I love, that they could be at like a protest for women's rights, a protest for LGBTQIA rights. I appreciate that about it. That was really interesting.
Thank you. That's so kind of y'all.
We were also talking about, we were also talking just the idea of language. So we noticed that, it's that this is a children's book, but there are a lot of big words. Just what your choices were around, like how you picked the language that you did.
Yeah, I think that might be a learning lesson, y'all, because if I were to lexile the book, I'm like, oh man, I mean, I'm literally telling you that I wrote this for my child. And I do use a lot of tier 4 language with him. I was an educator. This is my 18th year in education. And so a lot of those words my son does use, and he does understand what they mean, but I do recognize the privilege that he is identified as AIG. And so there's something about me being an educated Black woman and having the privilege of raising a child so that he has access to language and books. This is his bookshelf as it is. And so he's always had access to literacy in ways that maybe some communities have not had. Your whole entire organization exists to address some of the book deserts that exist in communities. And so I just have to recognize that that's a privilege point, and one that I might have to learn from later, because I think that I just probably wrote it from a biased perspective. And I didn't know anything about being an author, so I just literally use words that I use with him. So yeah.
I asked that more so, I think that it could be a way for, if a parent read it out loud, this child could ask questions about those words, and like it would really lead to a conversation. And if they didn't know that word prior, it's not a deficit, it's an opportunity for them to learn. So I think that's really important that you use those books.
Thank you. And that's how I have taught him a lot. And that's why he has those words. A lot of those words, he didn't know what they meant. And so we did go through that. And that is how those words then become a part of his vocabulary. But I recognize that if a child were to pick this book up on their own, they might need some assistance. I think that he might have needed assistance when he was in the 3rd grade as well. So that's probably around like the independent level. So I probably wear my educator hat too much. I'm talking about lexile levels and everything.
No, we understand your language.
Okay.
What's next for you, Keiyonna?
No, because I think that part of what I probably need to understand is the business end of it. I think there is something about like being an author that is particularly gatekeeping. I don't think there are a lot of authors who look like me, and because similar to when children don't have teachers who look like them, it's a tricky world to navigate. So I'm just trying to navigate this new space that I found myself in, but ultimately just making sure that like people have access to literature that can help to explain some difficult concepts and have some ongoing conversations with children, because I think that their voice and their perspective matters. And I think that they should see themselves in our stories.
And I really appreciate the book that is geared towards like us giving appreciation to the kids and their questions, right? Because I'm a mom of 2 boys and they are very inquisitive. And it's like, oh, they had some questions because I had my boys out there at the marches as well, but I have never like really sat down and asked them like, what do you feel about this? I know my youngest son does what he does, but this is making me really be a little bit more intentional with having conversations about how they feel with the things, ever changing things.
Oh, that means a lot. I think that's the purpose, right? So I hope that's next. I hope that it sparks conversation. I hope that it just pierces hearts to the point of building a coalition. I hope that it inspires allies. And I hope that it can be a vehicle for one day, right? For us to, truly be free, everybody.
Okay, so this is probably the end. We want to respect everyone's time. We do want to definitely highlight your book and let everybody know that they can get What's That Noise from us. We will be posting you on most all of our social medias, because one of the things about Rose Cafe is highlighting authors and helping authors who new to the game, and we're new to the game, but I think that if we do our part, maybe you can get more than what you had at first. And that's ultimately what we want to do, get Black authors their time and give them an opportunity any way that we could.
Yeah, you all are doing some amazing and important work. So I am just in support of whatever you all are doing. I think more communities need to do it. And I'm just so excited. 8,000 books, that's just, y'all kind of said that number like it was like no big deal.
We always count. We're like, so how many do you think we did?
Yeah.
8,000 books. And just knowing that's the access,
books.
Education is access to the middle class. Like that is life-changing, y'all. So good job, good work.
Thank you. And next time you're in Chicago, hopefully the store will be open for you to come visit.
Yes, I'm gonna come get some of y'all's nasty pizza.
I don't know about nasty, but we'll start you some good pizza.
So we have all of our YouTubes, all of our videos on YouTube. We will store this on YouTube. We'll post a clip from it on our page. On our page. Just share it, see what response we get from it, and we'll just keep going from there. Whatever next project you have, Keiyonna, please include us.
I will. Thank y'all for the support. It means a lot.
Your work means a lot.
Oh.
Thank you, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.